So a difficult question on this week's TGI. We discuss the tragedy of suicide.
Welcome to TGI Monday. A few weeks on the show, guys, a few weeks ago, we were talking about miscarriage and baby loss. And I just wanted to say thank you for the response that we had to that show. It obviously was an issue that was very real for a lot of people. And I hope that our discussion helped. But it's quite hard, isn't it, sometimes talking about those very personal, very...
It affects so many more people, doesn't it, than you might initially begin to think.
It's a taboo subject.
It is actually miscarriage. I think that's right. And I think the question we've got today is another one of those difficult subjects that often people don't really want to talk about. So this is the question that's come in. When people commit suicide, it can be for numerous reasons. So why should they be judged so unfairly? Are they still not allowed to be buried in holy ground? Thank you for the question. Thank you for sending in a question about this subject. First of all, perhaps if we just deal with the second part of the question to get that straight. Is it true that people who committed suicide are not allowed to be buried in consecrated ground in the Church of England?
I think it's one of those laws which is a bit like the same one that says that I can be arrested if I'm found in Chester after dark. Because I'm Welsh.
You're Welsh. Yes.
I think it's one of those things...
I mean, that's a good law, I think.
It is an excellent law. But I think it's one of those things that...
Just lost our Welsh audience.
Exactly. No, they're fine. Don't worry about it. But I think the thing is with it's one of those laws which people, in practice, people who've committed suicide are buried in holy ground and have been for a very, very long time, but we haven't quite got round to changing the law yet. And Zoe, you were saying about it?
General Synod passed a motion almost unanimously. Nearly 300 people voted to change this law, and actually the law is just catching up with practice. So as always, the legal stuff is difficult to undo and take some time, but actually unanimously almost everybody agrees that this is something that most vicars have been doing for a really long time, and that absolutely we should be compassion first and only.
Right. So hopefully, if anyone is in this circumstance with a relative or somebody, you should go to your church, you should go to your vicar, and it should be fine. There shouldn't be a problem.
Essential
with having that done. Okay, well that's great. So let's go back to the sort of meat of the question about suicide. Is it something that people should be judged for? Is it a sin? Is it? Well, how do we help people understand that from a Christian perspective? Dan, maybe you could talk about some of your experience and how you view it.
Well, I mean, I have been to lots of suicide and seen the grief. Is it a sin? Well, I mean, technically, but that's not the perspective I think we want to have on it. We need a pastoral perspective on it, because people, that kind of level of self-destruction doesn't happen overnight. That's something that can take quite a long time normally, unless something terrible has happened, which makes it more immediate. There are lots and lots of victims when it comes to a suicide. There's the family and the friends, as well as the person who's passed away. Other victims, though, are people often who find the person, the dog walkers, the people on the beach. There are times, sadly, when suicide is used as a weapon of hate. Someone will kill, and I've seen that on several occasions where people have killed themselves in order to hurt somebody else. So there's lots of ways that we need to respond to it, and not so every suicide is not the same. But God's love is the same. That's the thing, and God's compassion for us is the same, and God covers a multitude of sins by it.
So we certainly don't need to have that sort of superstitious view that because it can't have been confessed and therefore forgiven.
I don't think that's not the road I would ever go down.
No, exactly. God's forgiveness is bigger than that to be able to do it. So we certainly don't need to feel that it's something that excludes people from God's love.
I don't think that's. No. I don't think that's something that's been practiced or thought through.
I think individual people do think
I think individual people do, but I think it's a question
it's not what the church
it's a kind of hangover from something else.
Culture might think
exactly. And I think it's important to clarify to people that's not that's not the case. You don't need to be afraid for somebody you love who's committed suicide that has excluded them from
It's
God's
a myth
love.
about the church rather than the church's teaching, and it is something that comes up that nearly every funeral of someone who's taken their own life that I've come across, to be honest with you. Nearly always people have said that. Like, I think the tragedy of suicide is that a lot of the time it's actually a rational choice because their life has fallen apart to such a degree that they can't see any way out. And I think the darkness that has come upon them is unbearable for them. And I think the only response to that is to have that infinite amount of compassion for the person who's actually...
Because it's an end of suffering, isn't it?
Yeah, and I understand that. And I think there's no funeral of a suicide that I've done that I haven't actually been able to empathise quite deeply with the person there. And I think the only other experience I've had sometimes with victims of suicide is the unnecessariness of it sometimes. And I think the rage that comes with that, because the way in which the person who's taken their own life has been caught in a melee of pain that is not of their own making, and how it's just been so desperately sad.
And so given that, Hal, I mean, I guess you all have much more experience of this than me. I've never been in that situation of pastoring people through suicide. How do you minister to the people who are grieving, but I guess also feeling guilty, maybe also feeling angry? What do you say into that situation?
Well, as Dan said, every single situation is infinitely different, and there's no getting around that. So it's always about who you're with. Yeah. And actually, the response is the same in terms of the many ways that people feel. But one of the things that perhaps is less talked about is sometimes there's a sense of relief when someone we love is suffering, and you cannot, or you have not been able to alleviate their suffering, no matter what. Actually, sometimes the loving response from those people left behind is, well, at least she is not in pain anymore. And actually, so then part of our response is helping people to not pick up any guilt from that, and to, let's all lay down these burdens and be thankful for what we can be thankful for. But actually, it's all right to be at peace and to know that someone isn't suffering anymore. I mean, generally that's the same for anyone who's had a very prolonged suffering and death. It's worse for the people who stay behind.
In some ways, it's similar to someone who's suffered for a long time with something like cancer or something. If someone's been mentally ill for a very long time, taking their own life is an end result of that mental illness. I think sometimes as well, the only difference category, if you can categorise them sometimes, is sometimes people are victims of despair. Yeah. And I think despair is one of the most prevalent evils in our society. And I think that one of the reasons we're doing the Job Club is a response to people taking their own life.
Yeah,
we need to do something about despair.
And I think as a culture, sometimes we try to sanctify despair and make it okay, therefore, to be self-destructive. I think in terms of like the Dignitas clinics, for example, where we've decided end-of-life care is not something we care about. In certain cases, naturally, suicide is a way out for people.
Well, this question does come with the assisted dying
bill,
and actually that's another one.
And my sense is actually is that giving in to despair is not as a church is not something we're ever going to do.
We have a gospel of hope.
We do have a gospel.
And I think actually that's the message that we want to bring to people. Whatever stage they're at, whether people are listening who maybe have contemplated suicide or even attempted suicide, if you've had relatives who've committed suicide or friends, actually there is hope in the Christian message. There is no reason why we want to give in to that culture of despair and just say we can't do any more.
And you can't pretend. I think this is the thing, is that you can't pretend. As Dan said at the beginning, is that with suicide, the victims continue.
Yeah.
and you can't sanitize it.
Yeah.
No.
It's infinitely destructive.
Absolutely. So I hope that helps a bit. We don't want to be judging people who've got to that point. We don't want to be judging any of those victims that we've been talking about. But as a church, we hope we do have something to offer to people as they go through that very difficult grieving process. Once again, this is obviously a very real issue. I guess for some of you watching, a very personal issue. Please do feel free to get in touch with us if you've got stories you'd like to share or questions you'd like to ask more about that.
Thank you for watching. We'd love to answer your questions. So find us on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube.
Hold your look at the camera at the end. You especially always look at Rob for affirmation. Well, you don't need it.
He did ask for permission if we could go for a wee earlier. So
He did, yeah.